Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at,
Temperance.
temperance and moderation. It's a big topic,
Huge.
especially in a world that sometimes feels like it's all about excess.
Yeah, for sure.
So, to help us navigate this, we're going to be drawing on a book called The Power of Moderation: How to Thrive in an Age of Excess.
By Conrad Reicher.
That's right, by Conrad Reicher. And we're going to be looking at all sorts of angles here.
Yeah, history, economics, psychology, personal stories, the whole shebang.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
So get ready to have your mind blown.
Buckle up. So, when we talk about temperance, it kind of sounds like this old-fashioned word.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a stuffy vibe, doesn't it?
It does.
But what's fascinating is how this concept, temperance pops up again and again throughout history.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's embedded in different cultures, religion. And get this, there's even a scientific basis to it.
Really? Okay, so we're talking about more than just like grandma's advice to eat your vegetables in moderation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is a deep dive, a real deep dive.
Right, I'm ready to dive in. Where do we start?
Well, Reicher kicks things off with a pretty powerful example: the economic turmoil of Greece's debt crisis.
Greece.
Yeah.
That's a heavy hitter right off the bat.
It is. And it's a great illustration of what happens when excess, runs rampant.
Okay, so what happened in Greece?
Well, in the years leading up to the crisis, Greece was basically living way beyond its means. Excessive government spending, unchecked household debt, reckless lending practice, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. So it wasn't just individuals overspending. It was like the whole system was set up for excess.
Exactly. And it all came crashing down.
Ouch. So it sounds like temperance isn't just about personal responsibility.
Nope. It's also about systems and structures that either enable or discourage excess.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where does moderation fit into all of this?
Well, Reicher argues that we need to find a delicate balance between economic growth and the well-being of the population.
Right, because if everyone's just focused on getting more though, that can't be sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. It's like a car with a gas pedal but no brakes.
Yeah, you're going to crash eventually.
Yeah.
So how do we apply the brakes? How do we bring in moderation?
Well, Reicher introduces this economic principle called diminishing marginal utility.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
It's actually pretty simple. It basically means the more we consume of something, the less satisfaction we get from each additional unit.
Okay, I think I get that. It's like that first bite of cake is amazing.
The best.
But by the time you're finishing the whole slice,
You're feeling sick.
yeah, you're not getting the same enjoyment anymore.
Exactly. And this principle, it applies to way more than just cake.
Yeah.
It's relevant to material possessions, experiences, even information.
So it's like we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to buy more, do more, experience more. But does all that actually make us happier?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's where temperance comes in. It's about making conscious choices about what we consume and focusing on quality over quantity.
So it's not about deprivation. It's more about being mindful and intentional.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, do I really need this, or am I just caught up in the cycle of wanting more?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. So are there any real-world examples of this? Like companies or individuals who have successfully embraced temperance?
Absolutely. Reicher talks about Costco.
Costco, the bulk retailer.
Yeah, but think about it. They're all about efficiency and value. They avoid excessive advertising and focus on providing quality goods at the lowest possible prices.
I never thought about it that way. It makes sense. They're not trying to trick you into buying things you don't need.
Exactly. And they're incredibly successful.
Yeah, they are. Are there any other examples?
Oh, yeah. Reicher also talks about Warren Buffett.
Interesting. What does he have to do with temperance?
Well, he's famous for his long-term patient approach to investing. He buys companies that are going to perform well over time. He doesn't chase quick gains or risky ventures.
It's about discipline, resisting the temptation to jump on every trend.
Exactly. It's a classic example of temperance in action.
Wow. So we've talked about the economics of moderation, but what about the psychology? Why do we struggle with excess in the first place? Like, what's going on in our brain?
That's where things get really interesting. Reicher dives into the science of addiction.
Okay, this should be good.
It is. So it all starts with dopamine.
Dopamine. That's the feel-good chemical, right?
Yeah, it's a neurotransmitter in our brains that's associated with pleasure and reward.
So it's the feeling we get when we eat a delicious meal or achieve a goal or connect with loved ones.
Exact. But here's the thing. Drugs and addictive substances can hijack this dopamine system.
Hijack.
How does that work? They trigger a massive release of dopamine way more than we'd experience naturally. And that tricks the brain into thinking that the substance is super rewarding even when it's actually harmful.
Wow. So our brains are kind of working against us when it comes to addiction.
In a way, yeah. But the good news is that understanding how addiction works is a huge step towards managing it.
So what are some strategies for managing addiction or even just tendencies towards excess?
Well, Reicher talks about the importance of setting realistic goals, tracking progress, like using food diaries or fitness trackers, building self-control and managing stress through healthy coping mechanisms.
So it's not just about willpower. It's also about setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. And it's about having support. You can talk to people who will hold you accountable.
Right, because trying to do it all alone can be Really tough.
It can. So building a strong support system is key.
Okay, so we've talked about the economics and the psychology of moderation. Now I'm curious, what does history have to teach us about all this?
This is where things get really fascinating. Riker takes us on a journey through time, looking at how different cultures and societies have dealt with excess.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me some examples.
Well, there's this concept called hara hachibu, practiced in Okinawa, Japan.
Hachibu, what's that?
It basically means eating until you're about 80% full.
Interesting. And what's so special about Okinawa?
They have one of the highest life expectancies in the world.
Really? So moderation could be a key to longevity.
It's definitely a correlation worth exploring.
Wow, okay. What else?
Riker also looks at ancient Greece, a society that really embraced moderation. And then he contrasts them with the Roman Empire, which ultimately crumbled under its own excess.
It's like a tale of two civilizations, one thriving through balance, the other collapsing under its own weight.
Exact. And it's a powerful reminder that temperance isn't just some abstract ideal. It has real-world consequences.
Yeah, those are some pretty stark examples. So are we headed for a modern-day Roman Empire scenario?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? But the good news is that we can learn from history. We don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Right. We have the power to choose a different path.
Exactly. And that's what this deep dive is all about. It's about empowering ourselves with the knowledge and the tools to create a more balanced and fulfilling life.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh yeah, there's so much more to explore.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the world of temperance.
You know, when we talk about excess, it's easy to focus on the big picture stuff.
Yeah, like the economy, the environment.
Exactly. But I think it's also important to zoom in.
Zoom in on what?
On the individual level. Like,
Yeah.
how does overindulgence affect us personally? Our well-being.
That's a good point. We've talked about the costs of excess on a grand scale.
Yeah.
But what about the costs on a more personal level?
Right, and Riker really gets into this. He dedicates a whole section of the book to exploring the health benefits of temperance.
Okay, so we all know that too much junk food and not enough exercise is bad for us.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But Riker goes deeper.
Deeper.
How so? He dives into the research. He cites studies that show how moderation in all areas of life,
Like what? Specific.
diet, exercise, even sleep, it can profoundly impact our health.
Both physical and mental.
Both. It's all connected.
So it's not just about looking good in a swimsuit.
Nope. It's about feeling good too.
Okay, so give me some examples. What are some specific health benefits of practicing moderation?
Well, Riker talks about a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Okay.
They followed thousands of people across different cultures, and the findings were pretty amazing. Those who practiced caloric restriction.
Wait, caloric restriction? What does that even mean?
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's basically about being mindful of portion sizes
Okay.
and avoiding overeating, not stuffing yourself.
Right, it's not like starving yourself.
No. It's about finding a balance.
Shit.
And the participants in this study, they had lower rates of chronic diseases.
Really? Like what kind of disease?
Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, you name it.
Wow. So moderation could literally help us live longer and healthier lives.
It's definitely a strong possibility.
That's pretty compelling. What about exercise? How does moderation apply there?
Well, Riker's point is that you can overdo it with exercise, too.
Really? I thought more was always better.
Not necessarily. Excessive exercise can lead to injuries and burnout.
So it's not about pushing yourself to the limit all the time.
Nope. It's about finding an activity you enjoy
Right.
and doing it consistently, but not to the point of exhaustion.
So it's about finding that sweet spot again.
Exactly. Not too much, not too little. Just right.
Goldilocks and the 3 bears of exercise.
Exactly. And this principle, it applies to so many areas of our lives. It's about understanding our limits.
Right.
And respecting the natural rhythms of our bodies and minds.
Yeah, we're not machines.
Nope, we need rest. We need balance.
Okay, so we've talked about the physical health benefits. What about mental health? Does moderation play a role there too?
Oh, absolutely. Riker argues that temperance can significantly impact our mental and emotional well-being.
Interesting. How so?
Well, he cites research showing that people who practice moderation tend to have lower rates of anxiety and depression.
That makes sense. I mean, if you're constantly overindulging, you're probably more likely to feel guilty.
Exactly. Guilt, shame, regret.
Right, and those emotions, they can really weigh you down.
They can. And over time, they can take a toll on your mental health.
So it's not just about physical health, it's about the whole package.
The whole enchilada. The mind-body connection is real.
Okay, so how can we apply these principles of moderation to our mental health? What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, Riker talks about the importance of managing stress.
Okay, yeah, stress is a big one these days.
It is, and we all experience it. But it's about how we manage it.
Right. So what are some healthy coping mechanisms?
Exercise, meditation, spending time in nature, pursuing hobbies.
So it's not about eliminating stress altogether, because that's probably impossible.
It probably is. It's more about finding healthy ways to channel that stress.
Right. And that's where moderation comes in again.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between pushing ourselves and knowing when to take a step back.
To rest.
To great job.
To just be.
Okay, this is all great information, but I'm curious about something else.
What's that?
What about the role of government in all this? Should the government be involved in promoting temperance?
That's a tricky question. It is, because it touches on issues of personal freedom and collective responsibility.
Exactly. And Riker acknowledges those complexities. He points out that historically, governments have tried to regulate excess.
Like with prohibition.
Exact. And we all know how that turned out.
Not so well.
Not really. So it's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah, because on the one hand, we want to protect people from the harms of excess.
Right.
But on the other hand, we don't want to create a nanny state where the government is controlling every aspect of our lives.
It's about finding that middle ground. And Riker doesn't offer any easy answer.
Because there aren't any.
Nope, but he emphasizes the importance of education.
Education. So instead of focusing on restrictions and prohibitions, we should focus on teaching people about the benefits of moderation.
Exactly. Empowering them to make informed choices.
Because knowledge is power.
It is, and it's more sustainable in the long run.
I like that approach. It's about fostering a culture of awareness and understanding.
Right. Rather than relying solely on laws and regulations.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual level. Now I want to zoom out again.
Zoom out to what?
To the environment.
Yeah.
How does our collective excess impact the planet?
This is a huge issue, and Riker doesn't shy away from it. He argues that our overconsumption of resources is having a devastating impact.
Yeah, we all know about climate change and plastic pollution and deforestation.
Right, but it can feel overwhelmed. Like, what can one person do?
Exactly. So what does Riker suggest?
He starts with a powerful statistic. He says that if everyone on Earth consumed resources at the rate of the average American,
What?
we would need 4 planets to sustain ourselves.
4 planets?
Oh.
That's insane.
It is. It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah, that's a wake-up call.
Right.
So what can we do about it?
Well, Riker emphasizes the importance of mindful consumption.
Mindful consumption. What does that mean?
It's about being aware of what we're buying and why.
Okay.
It's about reducing our consumption, reusing items whenever possible, and recycling responsibly.
The 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
it's more than just a slogan.
Right, it's a way of life.
It's about shifting our mindset from thoughtless consumption to conscious awareness.
So it's about being more intentional with our choices.
Precisely. And it's about supporting sustainable businesses
Okay,
and advocating for policies that promote environmental moderation.
so it's a multi-pronged approach. Individual action, collective action, systemic change.
Yeah, it's going to take all of us working together.
Right, because this is a problem that affects everyone.
It does.
Yeah.
And the good news is that even small changes can make a difference.
Really? So like
Right.
bringing my own reusable bag to the grocery store?
Yeah.
Or cutting down on single-use plastic?
Exactly.
Right.
Every little bit helps.
That's encouraging, because it feels like we're constantly bombarded with doom and
I
gloom.
know, but there is hope, and it starts with each of us making conscious choices.
I like that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the individual to the collective, from the personal to the planetary.
We have.
But before we wrap things up, I'm curious about one more thing.
What's it?
What about the future of temperance? You know, does Riker see a world spiraling into ever-increasing excess? Or is there hope for a more balanced future?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Riker explores the potential of technology to promote temperance.
Okay, so how can technology, which is often seen as part of the problem,
Right.
actually help us become more moderate?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. Technology can enable excess,
Sure.
but it can also empower temperance.
Give me some examples.
Riker talks about apps for tracking consumption,
Sure.
digital detox tools, and even the possibility of future technologies like brain implants to regulate cravings.
Brain implant. That sounds a bit sci-fi.
It does, but it raises some fascinating questions about the role of technology in shaping our behavior.
Yeah, like where do we draw the line between personal freedom and technological intervention?
That's the big question. And Riker doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
Because no one does.
No. But he does challenge us to think critically about how we use technology.
Right, because it's a tool.
Yeah.
Like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. It's up to us to decide how we wield it.
So it all comes back to choice.
It does. We have the power to choose how we integrate technology into our lives.
That we use it to fuel excess or foster balance.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message.
It is. This has been a truly thought-provoking conversation about the power of moderation.
It has.
We've explored it from so many angles: historical, economic, psychological, environmental, social, even spiritual.
The whole spectrum.
And I think one of the key takeaways for me is that temperance isn't about deprivation.
Right.
It's about finding that balance that allows us to enjoy life to the fullest without going overboard.
Well said. It's about making conscious choices that support our well-being, the health of our relationship, and the sustainability of our planet.
Couldn't agree more. This has been an enlightening conversation, but we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment to reflect on these ideas.
Yeah.
And when we come back, we'll wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and takeaways.
You know, As we've been talking about all this, it makes you wonder,
I'll accept that.
if temperance is so important, why do we struggle with it so much?
Yeah, that's a million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is excess so tempting?
I think part of it is the culture we live in.
What do you mean?
Well, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to buy more, do more, be more.
It's like this never-ending cycle of wanting and acquiring.
Exactly. And social media definitely plays a role in that.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others.
And feeling like we're not enough.
So we try to fill that void with stuff, with experiences, with achievement.
And it's a temporary fix at best.
It is. So how do we break free from that cycle? How do we find contentment without excess?
Riker suggests that it starts with finding meaning and purpose in our lives.
Meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, but that sounds a bit abstract. How do we actually do that?
Well, he recommends starting with some introspection.
Perspective. So looking inward.
Exactly. Asking ourselves some tough questions.
Like what?
What are our core values? What are we naturally good at? What activities bring us joy?
Those are some pretty deep questions.
They are, but they can help us get to the heart of who we are and what we want out of life.
And once we have a better understanding of ourselves,
It becomes easier to make choices that align with our values.
and that includes choices about how we consume and how we spend our time and energy.
Exactly. It's about living in alignment with our true selves.
Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm curious about something else that Riker talks about.
What's that?
The spiritual benefits of temperance.
Ah, yes. This is where things get really interesting.
So we're moving beyond the physical and mental aspect.
Into the realm of the soul.
Okay, so what does Riker say about that?
He argues that temperance isn't just about achieving a healthy body and mind.
It's about something more.
It's about cultivating a sense of inner harmony and balance.
Inner peace.
Exactly. And he talks about how practicing temperance can help us develop certain qualities.
Like what?
Self-control, discipline, gratitude, compassion.
Those are all good things.
They are. And they can enrich our lives in so many ways.
So it's not just about what we consume or don't consume.
It's about who we
I
become.
like that.
Yeah.
It's about personal growth and transformation.
Exactly. And Riker believes that this inner transformation can ultimately lead to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's about aligning our actions with our values.
And striving to be the best versions of ourselves.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that temperance is a journey, not a destination.
It's a process.
Exactly. And it's a personal one. What works for one person may not work for another.
So it's about finding what resonates with you
And honoring your own unique path.
and being patient with yourself along the way.
Absolutely. It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
And it's about making choices that not only benefit ourselves, but also the world around us,
That's right. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness.
with each other and with the planet.
Exactly. So if you're feeling inspired to explore this topic further, we highly recommend checking out Conrad Riker's book.
The Power of Moderation: How to Thrive in an Age of Excess.
It's a great read full of insights and practical advice.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review.
We always appreciate your feedback. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking that balance in all areas of your life.